Hey everybody, welcome to the latest edition of The Gray Area. We have officially reached the vast wasteland that is the offseason. So now what? We're going to talk about it. Got some of the usual suspects, talk about what we've learned in the last week. Yes, there have been some lessons even without a game that the Lions played. Talk about what we have yet to learn. That might be the far more important thing. We've got to break Brad as he stepped up to the podium and had things to say with words that everybody has more words to say about, and my own draft wish list. It's vague at this point. It's so early, but it's one of those, Mom, everybody's doing it, so why can't I? That's part of the offseason. You get into draft wish lists, and I have one. It's different than most, and we will do that as well. Cue the music. Before I get started, please subscribe to the channel. That's how we get to do what we do and do the notification bell and sign up for all the things. DLP is going to be kicking out a ton of content coming up here this week and next month and on through the draft process with Riz and with Russ and with Bish and occasionally Chris. And then I'm going to bomb in there and dumb things up. So please be a part of that by subscribing to the channel. I want to start where I always do, with what we learned. And yeah, there was no game played. But you can still learn lessons if you're the Detroit Lions and if you're a Detroit Lions fan. And I think the first one is that life comes at you fast in the NFL. I went on record last week saying that the Lions, for the first time in my lifetime, have a clear ability and clear direction to get better. I believe that they can. Dan Campbell, Brad Holmes, they have every reason to get the benefit of the doubt this offseason, that they can patch up the holes on the roster, that they can get things right and get them pointed in the right direction, and that they can get this thing fixed and get back into the postseason in 2026. There's no getting around it. It's right there. They have earned that through the last 4 seasons, 4 winning years, and even this one that we're all disappointed in at 9-8. However, in the NFL, if for some reason they fall flat in that mission and it doesn't happen, well, then you need look no further than any of these guys, like Pete Carroll and Jonathan Gannon and Brian Daboll and Raheem Morris and whoever this guy is. I'm kidding, that's Brian Callahan. He coaches for a team, or he coached for a team called the Tennessee Titans. I often forget they exist. Kevin Stefanski in Cleveland. Mike McDonald, somebody that Lions fans have some interest in. And then, of course, the elephant in the room, John Harbaugh. The NFL spares no one. And if there is, for some reason, not the amount of improvement that there should be through this offseason and headed into next year, Dan Campbell, Brad Holmes will be facing that. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. You get the 1-year reprieve to get them back on track. And if with all this talent on the roster, that doesn't happen, Dan Campbell could find himself in deep, and that seat gets really, really hot, really, really fast if there isn't positive action with this squad headed into next year. And if you look around the league, you can see guys like Pete that were a one and done, John Harbaugh, who's been there forever. The NFL doesn't care. The DGAF, with your situation and what you did yesterday, it doesn't matter. And so if for some reason I'm wrong and stupid and dumb, and all of which is completely possible, and this Lions team doesn't get themselves back on track, Dan's going to be in the hot seat. Another thing I think we've learned, the extra time this year is going to be valuable. The last couple of years, you make the playoffs, you're absolutely consumed with playoff preparation and everything that goes into that. And the holes in the coaching staff especially don't necessarily get addressed with the same level of attention and detail that you would like to see them addressed with. And I think that some of that bore itself out in John Morton and his hiring and then eventual dismissal. And now that the Lions are back in need of an offensive coordinator, along with other coaches that may or may not be let go in the weeks to come, I think this extra time is going to do good things for the Lions. It's going to help this organization find its feet and get back to all of the things it says they want to get back to. More on that a little bit later in this episode. But the extra week and the extra time, easier to get on track when you're not buried in game preparation in January. Small consolation for fans. It sucks. I'd rather be watching the playoffs. But from an organizational standpoint, if you do have to do a little bit of remodeling on the house, better to have that time off work to get it done. Ben might be a problem. That's another thing we learned. He's running around winning playoff games with those Chicago Bears, and while I laughed hysterically watching Packers go down in flames and then that overdone WrestleMania handshake at the end of the game, fact remains that he is teaching this squad how to win games. They don't necessarily always deserve it. The point differential is something I've talked about a lot throughout the year. Living off of turnovers is something I've talked about a lot throughout the year, and they just keep doing it. I don't necessarily think now that they've got to face all of the good parts of the NFC West that they necessarily have a chance. But for an inaugural season with a young team and a young quarterback that was definitely in need of some psychological repair, I think you can make a case that Ben may be building a problem over there across Lake Michigan in Chicago. Now, sophomore slump could happen. They could fall back off. Maybe the turnovers don't fall their way. Maybe the quarterback play falls apart. Ask Minnesota how that goes. Nonetheless, I think you got to give respect where it's due, and Ben has earned that this year, begrudgingly. I'm all aboard the USS Benedict Johnson for the way he went and where he went, but man, oh man. The Bears are on to the divisional round of the playoffs, and he's to be given all the credit for that. Another thing that is undeniable at this point, got to expect a lot of new faces. I mean, I actually had to write them all down, and I'm sure that I missed a few. You're talking about Alex Anzalone and DJ Reader, both safeties. You know, no idea when those guys are going to be back into the lineup. Graham Glasgow, maybe Taylor Decker. That decision is still out there. Maybe David Montgomery. He certainly didn't get a vote of confidence from the general manager when he's saying things like he deserves to be somewhere where he's going to be given a chance to play, and if that's not here, then we got to take care of that. Khalif Raymond, Marcus Davenport, Levi Onwuzurike, realize he wasn't here. Josh Paschal, another guy whose contract is up. A lot of faces are going to be rotated out of town. There's going to be an infusion of new talent. I know it's the NFL and that happens every year, but a lot of these guys are some fairly well-known names. A few jerseys sold even with those numbers on them, and those guys are going to be gone. And that is also going to be a big part of this offseason, is finding ways to fill holes for guys that you've been depending on. Even if they're depth pieces and rotational guys, finding those replacements is going to be a big part of whether or not this offseason is a success or a failure with this coaching staff. And then there's one other thing that I feel like it shouldn't be a lesson learned, but maybe we have to. And it goes back to the press conference with Brad. And I've got a bunch of his thoughts on things coming up a little bit later. But the question of aggression and the question of whether or not the Lions will aggressively address the problems on the offensive line or the edge opposite Hutchinson or problems with pick your favorite necessity. Not sure I quite understand this. The offensive line was a problem this year. It needs to be fixed. That's job one as far as I'm concerned. It'll remain job one throughout the offseason. If you don't fix it, you don't get a center, you don't address the tackle position, you're going to have problems in the fall. But when you look back at just the last 2 years for the way that this team went about aggressively addressing some situations, look no further than cornerback. Because it's easy to forget that 2 years ago, that secondary was the howling nothingness of the void. And the Lions went out and they picked up Carlton Davis in a trade. And they drafted Terrion Arnold. And they drafted Ennis Rakestraw. And they signed Amik Robertson. And then they went back the following year and they got DJ Reed. Now, I know a lot of those haven't turned out. And that's part of the problem with aggression is you go all in, you trade for a guy, he's gone after a year, or he gets hurt. Looking right at you, Green Bay. And you can be out a lot of assets that it took to get those deals done, but the Lions haven't been shy about that. And when cornerback was a clear and pressing need, they went up, they addressed it in free agency, they addressed it in trades, they addressed it in the draft. That is part of my confidence. That's why I feel good about what they can do with this offensive line and the needs that they have there, because they are going to need to address that offensive line in exactly the same way. They're going to have to keep their nose to the grindstone and be looking for trades. They're going to have to scour all of the free agent possibilities that are out there, and then they're probably going to have to burn some draft capital on the offensive line to fix it. But they've proven that they can do that before, and they did it in the secondary. Not all of those things work out. Not all of everything works out. But when it comes time to fill a position group, this group of people in Detroit has proven they'll get after it as aggressively as anyone could ask for. Moving on, we got to talk about what will we learn? Because there are some things the Lions are going to have to do for the first time or going to have to prove that they can do for the first time correctly. And I think at the top of that list is whether or not Dan Campbell has figured out how to hire an offensive coordinator. And no, we will not know that when they announce the name, because we didn't know it last year when they announced the name. And we didn't know it when they announced Anthony Lynn. And if you're being honest, you didn't know it when they announced that the play calling duties and the offensive coordinator position was going to be segued over to Ben Johnson, because nobody knew who the hell Ben Johnson was or whether or not he could do the job. This is a place where Dan has had his biggest struggles. There's no getting around it. He hasn't hired offensive coordinators well. He's failed twice going outside the organization, and then he had an opportunity to put training wheels on a guy that was already in the building that he had familiarity with, and that is not something that's going to happen very often. You don't necessarily just want to find somebody that's a warm body in a carbon-based life form and give them the title and then hope they can figure it out. Obviously, it worked out in spades with Ben. Went over it. He's building the problem in Chicago. But he's got to go out there and prove that he can get the offensive coordinator position hire correct, because there's a lot less room for margin now. You've got big contracts on that team. You've got all the talent that any offensive coordinator could want, and Dan's going to have to take a hard look at just exactly what it is he wants to do. For me, I think it comes down to one of two things. Either he wants to maintain play calling, and he needs to build the entire staff around that from day one. No more switching after week 8. No more trying to make it up and do 2 full-time jobs with a staff that was built for something different in August. So he's going to have to make that decision, or he's going to have to let go of the reins a little bit. I know Mike McDonald is a guy that's been rumored. As I'm taping this, he hasn't been hired for anything. With my luck, he will be. The news comes hot and heavy this time of year, and it comes in fast, and so that may well happen. But he's got a serious decision to make, and it's going to shape all of the offseason, whether or not he can get this right this time. Every time you get it wrong, you lose a little bit of equity. And I'm hoping that he can recover that and figure out what his path is. No more half measures, no more half steps. He needs to pick a clear direction, dedicate himself to it, and then get the hire right. Another thing we are going to learn is whether or not Mike Disner's really good at all this money stuff. Now, so far, the Lions have been pretty good at drafting and really good at handing out contracts. They're excellent when it comes time to signing guys to big fat checks and taking that picture at the table in Allen Park and everybody's smiling and you bring your wife and kids and we all get to talk about grit and how these guys are foundational pieces and they're our guys and they do it right and you want to build around them and you're so glad that you've got your foundation poured. That part's good. That part's done. Now you've got to live with the salary cap ramifications of all of those deals that are coming due. According to Over the Cap, the Lions have got somewhere in the neighborhood of $18.1 million in effective cap space. And I know, before anybody says it, the cap is a myth and you can do anything you want to it. It's silly putty. It's a Scooby-Doo villain. It disappears in a cloud of mist. It's wearing a mask. It doesn't make any sense. Too many teams manipulate it every year to do whatever it is that they want. But sooner or later, if you're just ask the New Orleans Saints, you're going to be able to ask the Philadelphia Eagles with a lot of the dead money they've got coming up and all of those void years and things they've been stacking onto contracts. They flamed out in the first round. You've got to figure out a way to manage a different financial situation, and we're going to find out whether or not Disner and crew can do that. Another question related to that, speaking of what we will learn, is Mike Disner going to do it at all? He's already gotten one interview, and there are chances that he will get another one to be a president of operations somewhere in the NFL. The poaching of the Lions staff isn't limited to the coaches. Once you've shown that you are competent and that you can do good things, another team will come and try to give you a chance to elevate that and give you more status and more money and a bigger office and a nicer desk and all of those things. And Mike Disner may well be one of those guys. So that entire money department, all of the people on the business end dealing with the salary cap are going to have to be on their toes because things get a lot tighter moving forward for the Lions. And going back to my first point, another thing we're about to learn is how attractive this offensive coordinator job really is. You would think with all the names, with all the firepower, I know Mike McDonald's been a popular option to just plug in and go, well, he'll just turn Jameson Williams into Tyreek. And Jared Goff is basically Tua, but right-handed, and, less likely to flame out in a big moment. Maybe. If Dan's ready to hand over the reins. Going back to my first question, is this a really good job? Based on the personnel, it absolutely is. Lions offense is top 5 this year, even with all of the problems. But what does that entail? What kind of freedom do you have? Are you executing somebody else's offense? What are the job details? What are the expectations? And what are the parameters that the offensive coordinator is going to have to work within? Those are all questions that only Dan can answer, and they will decide whether or not this is a really, really, really great job or just a chance to get your name on TV a bunch of times next to all of those weapons and then have all of that pressure that goes along with maintaining the offensive performance. Whoever comes in is going to be expected to be a top 5 offense. You're going to be expected to stack yards and score points and run up all the gaudy stats because the Lions have done that even in down years with all of the weapons that they have. That's a lot of pressure. Some guys are going to dig that. Some guys are going to wilt. And then finally, we're going to learn whether or not this team can get back to what they were. And those aren't my words. Let's not forget that just a week ago, this is what Dan Campbell had to say.
I want to get back to some of the things we were doing a couple of years ago, and what I say and what I mean by that is just getting back to a little bit of what we did at the ground level, man. Just a little bit of the way we train, the way we go about things. This is going to be a good training camp for us. We're going to go back and really sharpen the sword a little bit.
So he wants to get back to where he was a couple of years ago, which means he recognizes that somewhere along the line, they lost some of the special sauce. Whatever it was they were doing, however it was they were conducting themselves, whatever it was they were doing in training camp, he says right there, he's looking forward to training camp. They obviously lost something somewhere. Can they get it back? Can you get that back from a couple of years ago now that guys have been paid? Now that all those contracts have been handed out? Now that some very popular locker room figures, like all of the guys I listed a few minutes ago, are going to be out of town. They're not going to be with this team anymore. You're going to have a bunch of new faces that you have to come in and make assimilate to the culture from a couple of years ago because you've identified that the culture you have currently might be part of the problem. That's a big ask for anybody. Dan's got a man-sized obligation in front of him to try to steer this ship with new faces and establish pieces that are in different places than they were just a couple of years ago. Guys have gotten rich. Guys have gotten married. Guys have become parents. There's a lot of changes that have happened in those couple of years, and getting that thing back to where it was and getting the hunger back within that locker room is a big, big ask. And special for this week, a new section called Breaking Brad. Clever wordplay. I can't get enough of it. At any rate, Brad stepped to the podium and took his medicine a little bit, had to answer a lot of questions from the press. I think I summarized them in our roundtable, and thank you to everybody who reached out about the roundtable. That was a lot of fun to do. It basically was 45 minutes of guys going, "Why'd you suck, dude? Why are you bad at this all of a sudden?" But he had a lot of specific things to say, and I think there are some nuggets in there that give you some idea of just exactly what this offseason is going to look like. I'll start with this one. This is Brad talking about the fact that it starts by looking in the mirror.
It's a lot of things that we're going to have to take a long, hard look at. But before I look at anything, I'm looking at myself. All right, so I have to do a better job. Obviously, haven't been good enough. And look, I'm always gonna look inward. So early stages, but already started to identify some things that I can definitely do better. And we're going to collectively just have to look at everything from top to bottom and just really be honest and just take that long, hard look. And really, that's probably the only light that may come out of this darkness, I would say, is when you have these kind of results, you don't have a choice. You're forced to look at everything long and hard and truthful.
I hope he means all of that. Telling the truth and getting an accurate evaluation and being really painfully, bone-crushingly honest with what went wrong is the absolute only way forward. The only way is through, as they say. And that's true for this team. They have got to find a way to address what went on, going back to a couple of minutes ago with Dan saying that they got to get back to how things were a couple of years ago. Well, how do you do that? You get in there and you identify the things that have changed for the worse. And some of those may be in your office. Some of those may be sitting at your desk. Some of those may be guys in that locker room that you really, really like, that either need to change their ways and get back to what they were doing or find a new place to play. So I hope that he means that. It won't be easy. That kind of honesty, it's fun to talk about. It's not as fun to engage in because some of those conversations are going to be really, really uncomfortable. He also talked about some of the lessons that he learned from Frank Ragnow's retirement. Now that Taylor Decker is potentially looking at leaving the league and ending his career, mostly what he wants you to know is that the offensive line hasn't been ignored.
It's never been ignored. It's like, it's going to come at some point. As good of, let's call it more veteran offensive line that we've had in the past that has been comprised of a lot of good players. At one point, 4 first-round picks at one point. It's never been ignored.
Now, while I agree that the line hasn't been ignored, and at one point they did have 4 first-round draft picks on that line, only one of them belongs to this administration, but that's neither here nor there. The point is, whether it's been ignored or not, a poorly timed retirement announcement late May, early June from Frank Ragnow really threw a wrench in things. I appreciate the fact that he doesn't want to say any of that. I appreciate the fact that this organization isn't going to say a bad word about Frank Ragnow. He's a fan favorite, and he gets to make whatever decision he wants to make for his future. But there's no denying the fact that it jacked things up and that you cannot let that happen again. It's why the offensive line has to be job one. It may not have been ignored up until now, but it has definitely risen up the priority chart. I get why you address the secondary, like I was saying to start the show. I get why you'd sign the CBs. I get all the skill position players, but now it's time to reload because you don't have 4 first-round draft picks. You have 1 and maybe Taylor Decker. Maybe. Either way, you've got to have a much better plan, one that everybody is on board with come fall for that offensive line. Speaking of which, he wanted to repeat that it hasn't been ignored.
It hasn't been ignored in terms of I know we've, drafted in 21 and then 22 we didn't, but 23 we went late, 20, but you'd be surprised about the moves that we tried to do that we could not get done that involved offensive linemen, whether that be draft or free agency.
Not really comfortable with the whole idea of there were a lot of deals you didn't see that just didn't get done. That is very much the NFL GM version of, no, man, I've got a girlfriend. She goes to a different school. You don't know her. You've never met her. She doesn't live in town. Okay, great. Deals didn't get done. I'm assuming that lots of deals don't get done for every team every year. That can't happen again, I think, is the important point. It's great that there were attempts. It's great that everybody understands that the offensive line is really, really important, but the offensive line as it stands right now is on fire. You have multiple spots that have to be addressed this offseason because if you don't, you're going to have big problems, and you just watched that in this 9-8 season. So it's great that it wasn't ignored. Okay. But I don't need to hear about the phantom deals. That doesn't do anybody any good. Things have got to happen. You're going to have to make some important decisions and get some things done. You can't be talking about the deals that didn't get made next fall. You got to get this done. There was also one really interesting quote in here when he was talking about retooling this team, when somebody asked him about the qualifications he was expecting for the next Lions offensive coordinator.
There has to be leadership. There has to be detail-oriented. It's got to be command of the room. You just have to be able to know that there's somebody that's going to be able to dot every I, cross every T, and make sure that nothing is compromised from a detail standpoint, from a standard standpoint, from the start of the game planning period all the way till the end of the week.
I may be stepping slightly out of line here, but what he said is, we need bizarro John Morton. We need the attention to detail. We need leadership. We need a guy that can own the room. All things that didn't happen this year with John Morton, with the way his relationship with the players went, with the detail orientation that absolutely showed up on game day. All of those things pointed in one direction, and Brad came and said the quiet part out loud. We need a guy Nothing like the one we just had. We learned our lesson. We're going to take our medicine. We're going to find a guy that's going to be on the details and that has the respect of that locker room, because when you don't, you end up with what we had this year. He also went on to say that there would be some minor tweaks made that won't make a lot of headlines, which seems unimportant, but it kind of isn't.
Honestly, a lot of the things that we'll look at and a lot of the changes and tweaks and adjustment that we will make probably won't come with a headline. But that's not to say that we won't do something that's in that splash category but I don't think it's it's not indicative of a lack of effort, work ethic.
Again, I appreciate the need to defend his staff and the work ethic and to try to convince everybody that they're not just sitting around sipping Mai Tais and getting things done. But if the minor tweaks don't make headlines, that's fine. If they don't make a difference in the fall, it's not. And so whatever gets done collectively as a whole has to be better. I'm going to go back to my original point, the one I started the whole show with. Life comes at you fast in the NFL. It's all well and good to say that you're doing a lot of things, and some of which won't get noticed and nobody will write about it, and on and on and on. That's great. If it doesn't turn into winning football, it won't matter. And then there was this. And this is the final point because I think it's hopeful and I think I agree with it. It's what I tried to say last week. And he got asked the question about how far he feels this team is from the Super Bowl. And as it turns out, Brad and I are in lockstep here.
I don't think that we're that far off. I personally don't. We have a lot of good players. We have a lot of good young ascending players. We have a really good quarterback. We have the right coach. I do think that we're very close. And hey, look, maybe that is some of the things that, maybe that's one of the items that needs to be looked back on, is thinking that you are so close. And so then now you start changing some things because you only need this piece. You only need that piece. And you got to feel, and it's like, no, who's the best player to fit for what we're trying to do that has gotten us to have the expectations that we have as a football team right now? So, again, we'll be looking at everything, but I do not think that this is a deep surgery overhaul. I don't think that. But obviously there needs to be some adjustments made for sure.
I think all of that's right. Adjustments do need to be made. And you're going to need to go out there and get after it and make sure that you do the tuning and the tweaking and the tightening and all of the things that you need to do to get this team back there, because there's so much of this roster that's ready to go and so much of the coaching staff that's ready to go. There's a lot there in Detroit, and Brad should be proud of the roster he's assembled. Dan should be proud of the results he's gotten in Detroit, because God knows nobody else has. And it's all right there to be had. But it has to be right. And the margin for error is getting slimmer by the day. But I agree with him. I think this team is right there. I don't want to lose all of the optimism that people seem to be in a hurry to lose when Brad stepped to the podium last week in grilling him and holding him responsible and accountable for everything, because this team did just rack up its 4th winning season. It does need to make some adjustments. It does need to fix the holes in the roster, and then it can go forward and be one of the dominant forces in the NFL next year. And finally, I'll wrap things up with the obligatory My Draft wish list. Yeah, everybody does one of these. I feel like I have to. It is bound to look stupid, like probably soon. It's January. So any draft specifics are ridiculous and stupid and dumb and awful, because all of the free agent deals are going to be done and the trades are going to be made, and somebody's going to smoke a gas mask bong and another guy's going to get arrested, and draft boards are going to fall and rise and guys are going to go crazy and agents are going to pump guys up, and then some dude's going to run a 4.25 at the combine, and that's going to change things again. So I want to put all of those caveats out there. This is bound to look stupid after those moves get made. But as we sit here in early to mid-January, I will just say that if the Lions walk out of the first round without a tackle or an edge, that'll suck. I think tackle's probably the way to go, and I think there are going to be guys there. I don't just say like grab a tackle to grab a tackle, because Brad Holmes would fight me. He has said over and over again, you don't just take a guy to take a guy. It's got to be the right guy. It's got to be a dude that fits your roster. It's got to be a guy that fits your scheme. It's got to be the right culture fit. All of those things have to apply. So I'm just granting you all of that because I think there's going to be one there. But if they leave the first round without an edge or a tackle, with the roster as it's currently constructed, I'm going to be bummed out, because there aren't many chances to get good offensive tackles outside of the first round. Just look it up. I think 22 of the starting left tackles in the league were all first-round draft picks. And we all know about the edge thing. The edge thing has been blogged to death. You got to get somebody opposite Hutch. And I don't disagree with that, especially with Marcus Davenport and Levi failure to launch and Josh Paschal failure to launch. And AQM is a free agent. And you've got Hutch and tumbleweeds. So another edge in that first round would be a good one. And I'll go ahead and risk anything like my own credibility. One of them Utah boys would look all right to me at the offensive tackle position. If you're looking for names, the guys that I think will be there, there are some dudes that I don't think are going to make it down to 17. But either Spencer Fanu or Fano or Caleb Lomu, I feel like one of those guys are going to be there, and either one of them would work. Weirdly enough, Utah football and the state of Michigan have been crashing into each other in recent weeks. But I've always liked watching Utah football. They play a really Big Ten-ish kind of brand of football for being stationed out there in the Pac-12 and now in the Big 12. And I think either one of those guys would look pretty good on Sunday in a Lions uniform. And I think they probably look okay at right tackle, because ultimately, as I've said a million times, I think you move Penei Sewell to the left tackle position, and I think it's easier to find a right tackle than a left tackle, especially at that point in the first round. So those are a couple of guys that I have my eyes on. Again, it's early January. That's going to look stupid. Russ mentioned during our roundtable, and he mentioned again during his draft show, I'm going to butcher this, but Mateo Ungalele. I think I got that close. The defensive end from Oregon. He's another one, a little bit of a reach at 17, but at 270 pounds, he's got pass rush moves. The whole can crushing thing applies. He's another guy that I've got my eye on that would be a really, really nice fit in Detroit if one of those tackles wasn't available, or if for some reason they're not as sold on them as I am. That would be somebody I'd be okay with. Not the only one, but just a name this early in the process. I think they've got to come out with an offensive tackle or an edge. They have needs in both trenches. It all starts up front. We know that about this football team. We know that about every football team. That's all of football. That's just how this thing goes. And I think either one of those dudes, any of those dudes rather, there's three of them that I just named. Right now, as we sit in January, and I reserve the right to change my mind or just forget that I said any of this, those guys, they'd foot the bill. They would fit right in Detroit and fix some things that need fixing in a big, big way. Man, oh man, they got to get that offensive tackle position fixed in the first round. I'm more convinced of that than ever. All right, well, that is going to do it for me. Man, thank you so much for taking the time. Again, thank you for checking out all of the content. And Riz, Russ, and Bish are going to be all over the draft stuff. We got really, really smart people working at DLP, and there's me. But I appreciate you taking the time. Please subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you next time.